Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of You Are My Borough with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. We're recording this off the back of Borough's thumping 4-0 win over Preston. I think we're allowed to use thumping when they've scored 4 at home. So we'll obviously have a chat about that, talk around a few of the issues surrounding the game, and then have a bit of an early look ahead to the trip to Elland Road to face Leeds this weekend. A couple of bits of early housekeeping. If you're watching this on YouTube, then please like, subscribe, and leave us any comments on the vid. If you're listening to it on one of the various podcast platforms, then rate and review, and hopefully tell your mates that this is the place to be for all things Borough. Dom, you were at the Riverside last night. It was your gig. I mean, it doesn't get much better than a 4-0 home win like that with a fairly injury-ravaged side against a team, right up there battling for the playoffs. I mean, good night.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that about the thumping, actually, the 4-0, because when it was 3-0, I had thumping, and then I'm thinking, is 3-0 a thumping? But it was, I thought it was the manner of the 3-0 and it was a first half thumping.
3-0 at half time, so yeah, exactly, a first half.
Thumping, yeah, I thought so. But 4-0, and then it's knowing that, I think 4-0, you're in hammering territory, aren't you, when you get
Yeah, you're certainly getting there. There's a definite international window video in this, isn't there? The various, when does a thumping become a hammering, become a annihilate, a battering?
Yeah, what makes a humiliate?
Yeah,
I think conceding 3 in the first half isn't far off humiliation, but then I think you've got to take into account who you're playing as well.
True.
With a humiliation. True. You concede 3-0. If you concede 3 at home in the first half, it's undoubtedly.
That's a home humiliation. You've got a bit of alliteration in there as well. Borough 3 before half time, obviously 4-0 with Bangura's goal right at the end. I mean, loads and loads of positives, but I think you alluded to this in your kind of match analysis piece that obviously went up live after the game and is in the paper this morning. Probably the biggest tick in the box for Borough is the fact that it was achieved with so many players out, and not just any players. I mean, Fry, Hackney, McGree, Force, Tommy Smith, players that you would probably have had. Well, there's no probably about it, that you would have had on the team sheet, earlier in the season as absolute nailed-on starters. They're not there, and yet Borough have turned in a performance like that. That's got to be really, really positive for Carrick, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's an exaggeration really to say that he was without last night. Carrick was without 9 players who would arguably be in his first choice 11 had everyone been fit at the start of the season. We know how kind of reliable Tommy Smith's been. So his first choice back 4 would probably be, or could probably be, Smith, Fry, Lenihan, Engel. Hackney's obvious to be in there. Had Lewis O'Brien had a run of games, you could make a case that he'd have played his way into the team. And I think Riley McGree and Marcus Force at the start of the season had both been in the strongest 11 of most fans. So to win without all of those players in such comfortable and emphatic fashion against a team who, while I thought they were really, really poor on Tuesday night, they came into the game in the top 6. Loads of positives. Concerns as well, clearly, which we'll get onto with Hayden Hackney and Dale Fry missing. But a big tick in the box to achieve a win like that in the absence of so many players. And I think Borough and the players who came in will take great confidence from that.
And so when we talk about the players who are missing, clearly players have come in to replace them. Who last night do you think really stood out for you in terms of the players who have come in and are potentially now going to have an extended run in the team if some of these injuries are longer term?
Well, not one who you're going to look at and think that he's going to have a prolonged run in the team. But I thought Morgan Rogers did really well. Rogers clearly looked favourite to start against Leeds on Saturday, given Greenwood can't play. I thought it was quite clever, really, of Carrick to bring him in a game earlier and give him a game to get an hour, 70 minutes, whatever it was, under his belt. So he's not going into Leeds cold off the back of just a few cameos here and there. And he was at the heart of everything positive from Boro really in the first half. But then all of the front four were, I thought Crooks had his best 45 minutes I've seen him have for a long time.
Lovely pass for the first goal, isn't it?
Yeah, and Jones clearly, two great finishes. And Carrick talked afterwards about how he wants to see more of that from Jones, using his pace to get in behind the last man like that. Yeah. And Latte Lath, I wrote in the match report, at times you don't know whether it's indecision or brilliance, really. But whatever it is, Preston didn't have a clue what he was going to do. I'm not sure at times Latte Lath had a clue what he was going to do. But it works, doesn't it? It's one of them. It's kind of like brilliant chaos, isn't it? And I thought Barlaser took his chance in midfield as well. He just did the simple stuff very well, I thought. It sounds daft, really, to say he had a hand in both of the goals, given that I think he played a 3-yard pass to Crooks before the assist for Jones and the same for Rodgers. But especially with the first goal, he could have very easily had a crack, pulled the trigger, panicked, saw sight of goal, seen glory, but he kind of just kept play ticking over, which I think
kind of unlocks it with that initial pass, doesn't he? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll get on to Jones in a second, but just on Rodgers, I know we've kind of touched on this, I think, in previous vids, but he's paid the price a little bit for being played out of position at the start of the season, hasn't he? In that, we all kind of made our minds up on him to a slight degree. And I think it's showing now that it's been pretty unfair because he was playing as a 9. He's not a 9, in no way, shape or form is he really what Boro need from a number 9 in the team the way Carrick plays. Play him either as a 10 or in one of the wide attacking roles, and you see a completely different Morgan Rodgers. And he's now looking a real threat at championship level in either of those two positions, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I thought he just found the pockets really well in that. He suits that because we know from McGree and the other players who've played in that role off the left, Greenwood in recent weeks, that they have the freedom, especially last night with Bangura, who wasn't really tested defensively. So he just had the license to get forward at every opportunity, which then allowed Rodgers to come in and drift inside and pick up the pockets. And the kind of 3 behind was so fluid. And Preston just had no answer. And Preston, Ryan Lowe must hate coming up here, mustn't he? Because they were thumped here last year, weren't they? When Boro were in that run of just blowing teams away. And the first half, I know we've kind of moved beyond the comparisons to last season now, haven't we? But the first half on Tuesday night reminded me of that, really. Just Boro just blowing teams away. Preston had 2 shots on goal in the first half, both kind of wayward efforts from the captain. I think he had 1 shot on target in the entirety of the 90 minutes. And then, as we'll get on to, I'm sure, such was the comfort, Boro were able to bring Matt Clark on, Law McCabe, Jones and Rodgers were both taken off for 20 minutes to play. If it was had Carrick been able to design the perfect night before kickoff, it probably wouldn't have been far off.
Yeah, that
playing out as it did.
So let's talk Isaiah Jones. We know how talented he is. We all obviously know the issues that were there last season. We don't really have to rake over those again. But just when he is playing like that, cutting in from the flank, darting in behind, wanting the ball, looking to be positive when he's got the ball. I mean, there's not many better in the Championship, is there? He looks a Premier League player when he's doing that. All ends up. And he can be a massive, massive player for Boro in the rest of this season, can't he, when he's in that kind of mood and that kind of form?
Yeah, I said exactly that to Carrick afterwards. When he's on song like that, there aren't many players better in the Championship in that position, are they? And Carrick touched on what I said there, really, that the next challenge for Jones is maybe doing more of what he did last night, getting him behind. Yeah. I thought his 2 finishes as well were really calm and composed. Probably telling of how he's developed as a thinker on the pitch, because when he first came through, it was maybe kind of all pace and power, wasn't it? And then didn't have time.
There's a bit of what I would describe as the Theo Walcott's about him, which is there's plenty there, but just wild in front of goal. And you're right, he's clearly honed that part of his game an awful lot.
And I spoke to Isaiah Jones afterwards. He was the player who was put up to speak to the press, and he was talking about, and these quotes will be around online on Thursday morning in Thursday's paper. He was talking about how he feels now a much more complete player than he was a couple of years ago when he first came through the ranks under Chris Wilder, and he said how really when he came through there, his biggest advantage and his biggest strength was the fact that no one really knew anything about him. Whereas now, everyone knows what he's about and everyone knows how to prepare for him, and teams often double up on him. But he says he sees it as kind of evidence of his progression, that he can now come up with ways to beat that, even though teams know what he's all about, which I thought was spot on.
And is it also helping him, do you think, that I think finally now the questions over where he plays are, they're put to bed. Aside for an absolute calamitous injury crisis, I don't see Michael Carrick playing Isaiah Jones as either a right back or a right wing back. He is a right winger. He's a right forward. And he seems to be benefiting from, being played there exclusively now.
Yeah, and I think he's benefiting as well from playing closely to Matt Crooks again, because that worked so well, didn't it, under Chris Wilder, and with Anthony Dijksteel in there as well. That little trio, that triangle, worked so well under Wilder, and we know that Crooks and Jones have that understanding. We saw that for the first goal, but I've spoke about Dijksteel on here in the past. I really like Dijksteel at right back, and I think he suits Carrick's Boro. And he was one of the players who took his chance. And it'll be interesting at Leeds, won't it? I know we'll get on to Leeds, but Vandenberg was excellent at centre-half. We've talked about this, haven't we, at length?
Yeah.
Does he keep Vandenberg in now? And does that allow Dijksteel to keep his place at right back? But then if Fry's fit, Fry's going to come back into the team, isn't he? And he's not going to drop McNair, but I suppose really it's credit to the players that even with all the players out, Carrick's still got dilemmas really in the seams. Yeah.
So we'll touch on the injuries in a second, but just one last one on the game itself. Obviously, you said there, a couple of late sub appearances for Matt Clark, first game in more than a year. Law McCabe debut for Boro. I mean, two players clearly at very, very different stages of their career. But Clark first, with the injuries that Boro have at centre half, he could be a fairly important player in the next month. Depending, we're obviously, as I say, we'll get the injuries in a minute, but we're a bit in the dark at the moment on exactly what the situation is with Dale. But we know there's going to be no Darragh Lenihan. Yes, as you said, Vandenberg, undoubtedly a very good option there. But if anything was to happen to either him or McNair, Clark at the minute is probably the next cab off the rank, isn't he?
Yeah, and we've talked about McNair in January and that whole situation. We don't need to dig over that again. Carrick spoke about that afterwards, because it feels like every time we've asked him about Matt Clark in the last few weeks, it's been about the character of coming through such a difficult time, and what does that say about his desire to get back. And yet, said to Carrick last night, as a player, clearly he's got bags and bags of character to come through what must have been an incredibly difficult time, a year of being out injured, and for a lot of that time, he didn't know, he couldn't get to the bottom of the injury, was it? So it's the uncertainty, I think, that must have been so difficult to handle. But forgetting that for a minute, as a footballer, what can Clark offer you? Because we haven't really seen an awful lot of it to be able to know. But he is a centre half who's played dozens and dozens and dozens of games for big clubs in the past. When he signed in the summer of last year, he was seen as a really good defensive addition, wasn't he? And he's a natural left. He's a natural left-sider as well. He only came on for 10 minutes, and clearly Preston were ready for home, but he actually saw a fair bit of the ball and was really composed with it. And we've talked about that Port Vale game. Might he get a start there?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Maybe that might depend a little bit on what's happening with Dale. But yeah, that's certainly not inconceivable. And then at the other end of the kind of age and experience scale, another young Boro Academy product, a Boro lad. Where do you think he's at in terms of his development?
It's well, to have your Fincartwright was on a bench 16, Law McCabe 17. McCabe, I think he's from the Ayrsham area, from the Boro Town Centre area, and Carrick's face lit up afterwards when he said,
Really?
that is as good as it gets for me as a head coach, kind of giving a local lad like that a debut. But then he stressed, and he has done this a few times when you look back at the various players who he's given chances to. Pharrell Willis, I remember at Blackpool last year. Finn Cartwright, I think, became the second youngest player after Nathan Wood when he came on. Was it Huddersfield in the League Cup? But he said, I'm not just doing this to be nice. The kind of in the squad because they've impressed, they've in the squad because they deserve to be, and I wouldn't give them this chance if they didn't deserve it. And Boro possibly only a couple more injuries away from having to call on one or two lads to play. I mean, they haven't got that many options really beyond what was available on the bench last night. And it is good, I think when you see any club, no matter who you support, as a local lad especially, there's no better, is there, than seeing someone who's come through the ranks, one of your own, come on and get a chance, because that's what we all dreamed of, didn't we, as kids growing up.
And some managers, and to be fair, some managers in the not too distant past of Boro have been very much the first team and the academy are two completely separate entities, really loath to bring kind of kids even up to training unless they absolutely have to. Whereas Carrick, right from the word go, has kind of said, no, I'll dip into the academy squad and bring them to training for maybe a week. Partly because it's good for them, partly just because it helps the senior lads sometimes to have a bit of fresh opposition in there for small-sided games, etc. And, he definitely seems to be a manager who fundamentally believes in the importance of the academy and wants it as integrated with a first team kind of setup as he can possibly get. You get that impression just from walking around Rockcliffe, don't you? You've been able to pick up in the past when the academy's almost felt like a kind of a kind of unwanted part of the family almost, if you like, and it's felt very, very separate. That's certainly not the case now.
No, and I think the other thing is there are managers who in this position, with all the players out injured and with January approaching, might have been tempted to leave empty spots on the bench last night and done the classic, this is
what I need.
This is how short we are. But Carrick, A, didn't do that, and B, that as we talked about at the start of the season when he has full faith in his players and isn't one for talking about what he might need or what he hasn't got. He clearly felt that I'm not just putting these kids on to fill the bench. I'm putting them on because they've earned it, because they've caught my eye in training. And I think the other thing as well, it's not just Carrick has complete faith in him, but we know how much Woodgate loves giving young kids a chance and how much.
And you suspect Woodgate is an important link for Carrick to the academy. You know what I mean? He knows the academy set up inside out. He knows the players. He knows the coaches. So he'll have that insight, but he'll also, you imagine, just be a really valuable bridge between the two.
Yeah, and he knows the pros and the difficulties of being a young lad coming through, doesn't he, and playing for his hometown club and all that brings. And Hayden Hackney has always struck me as the type who never really needs someone to tell him anyway. But if Woodgate, if he ever did need to sit down with anyone, then really Woodgate's the perfect guy to do that, isn't he?
So let's look ahead, and initially through the prism of the injuries. I mean, as we've said, the fixture list just keeps on coming really all the way through December. So let's start with Fry and Hackney. I mean, as is his kind of want, Michael Carrick not really giving anything away in terms of the potential severity of the injuries afterwards. We're obviously recording this before the pre-match Leeds presser. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of an update or some insight there. But I mean, it's a worry, isn't it? Two massive players, muscular injuries, it sounds like, which, can be kind of anything, can't they, really? So, clearly a worry.
Yeah. If you had to choose two players before the Preston game who you didn't want to get muscular injuries, then Hackney would probably be top, wouldn't he? And Fry, I know Fry had a rough afternoon at Bristol City, but clearly Fry is a major player for Boro, especially at the minute in this kind of unfamiliar back line, really. So it is a concern, and it's not clear at this stage how long they're going to be out. And I suspect, I know we're recording this before Michael Carrick's presser on Thursday, in all likelihood, he's not going to give anything away. That he wouldn't give anything away anyway, would he? And he certainly isn't going to give anything away before a game like Leeds United away on Saturday. So I don't think we'll get any inclination really until 2:00 on Saturday afternoon when the team drops. And I think to get either back would be a major boost. And with muscle injuries as well, you're not going to take the risk, are you? You know, if there's a slight doubt, you're not going to risk them on Tuesday night.
And you know, with McGree, McGree obviously is that bit further ahead than Force, but given the length of time both of them have been out for now, they're not going to kind of just stroll back straight in the first team. They're going to need some training. Might need an under-21 game, but you imagine they'll probably need a little game on the bench or something. So, you know, we're talking probably Leeds, Ipswich, Hull, maybe Swansea, and even that Port Vale game. It's going to be a case of easing players back. Rather clearly, if Fry and Hackney are right, they've only missed one game, they'll go straight back in. But the rest of the injured lads either aren't going to be around at all, or are probably not going to walk in the next 2 or 3 games anyway.
No, Carrick was quite revealing on McGree in his press conference on Monday. I'm sure fans will have read or seen it by now, but if you haven't, he talked about how it's promising with McGree. It's positive. He's making positive steps, but because of the nature and the injury, that can change very quickly. And what he doesn't want to do is say, you know, I hope to have him back for Hull, because then if he's not, it might be seen as a setback, when in actual fact, it's not one of those injuries that you can put a day anyway. So McGree probably still looks a few weeks away. And then he said Force is further away than that, or longer than that was his quote, which, you know, like you say there, really, considering they're not yet in training yet, I think it's a push. Unless they are further ahead and Carrick is trying to keep things under wraps. But if they're not in training yet, it probably looks a push to get them back before Christmas, I think. By the time you get them back in training and back underway, and then obviously you've got Lucas Engel to worry about now. That was a knee twist that was pretty nasty, Carrick said. And obviously Smith and Lenihan are long term. Senny Dieng went down and needed treatment.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Was the feeling there that was kind of remedied straight away, or is that one they're going to? I mean, clearly they're going to have to keep an eye on it. But is that a worry?
Well, Carrick didn't say. He said, I'll be honest, I don't know what the issue was, but which suggests to me it wasn't a major worry. But
too bad.
Chris Mosley's certainly earning his money at the minute, isn't he?
Absolutely.
In that medical team. I think, as I say, I mean, I can't imagine Carrick's going to give much away on Thursday. Can you? Saturday, the team news on Saturday is going to be pretty revealing.
So Saturday, Leeds away. I mean, big old game, whatever the circumstances, but you know, probably even bigger the way that the two teams are right bang up there now.
What are your standout Elland Road memories then? There's been some big old games there.
Well, I way back in the day, I worked for the Yorkshire Evening Post. So I covered Leeds in the tail end of the Venables era, which was the whole unravelling, Ridsdale, the Goldfish, all of that. But then mainly the Peter Reid era, where they were terrible, but somehow scrambled to survival right at the end of the season. But then we're even worse the next season. Reid went, and that was the whole kind of Kevin Blackwell, and that was when Leeds went down. So I was there for a year and a half to 2 years covering Leeds. So I've actually covered Leeds in Europe, Malaga away under Venables, which was not a bad little job. So I went, I managed to take Leeds from Malaga away to Rotherham at home in the space of about 12 months. So that was quite impressive.
Tell the story of the Goldfish for for anyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, so the goldfish was the when Leeds when after Ridsdale left and Leeds were kind of plunging towards administration, they brought in a team of administrators to kind of troll through the accounts, and just a whole load of stuff came to light about what Leeds had been spending money on during the Ridsdale, David O'Leary, kind of the peak Leeds era when they were just spending money. And most of it went on exorbitant player transfers, Rio Ferdinand, people like that, wages, etc. But then it also came out, and I can't remember the exact figures, so I'm plucking the figures slightly here, but it was something like they were paying £1,000 a month to hire goldfish for the tank in the boardroom at Elland Road, which is fantastic, isn't it? I mean, goodness me. The only thing that's comparable was Sunderland when Methven and Stuart Donald came in. Methven gave us an interview and said that Sunderland had been paying this was under Ellis Shaw, I think, a consultancy. Again, a ridiculous figure. It might have been £1,000 a month. It was something like that to move around the pot plants in the ground, in the training ground. So they would just come in and, like feng shui style, move around the pot plants. That's not bad, is it?
The wonderful world of football.
Yeah, the wonderful world. What about you? What about Boro memories at Elland Road for you then?
Was it Emnes, the 1-0? Mowbray?
Yeah, I remember that.
Was it Mowbray? I'm going to check this. When Leeds, yeah, there was a game when a load got did Leeds was 3 people sent off. Did Leeds? Yeah, Marvin Emnes goal. Yeah, as they beat 9-man Leeds. That was the same game. And wasn't Tony Mack sent off for Boro as well? Didn't Boro want 3 players sent off? And that was when. So the away fans used to be in a different corner at Leeds.
Yeah, they moved them around 3 or 4 times.
Because I remember I was in the away end that day. Yeah, I remember that. I remember Luciano Becchio. I don't even know whether this happened, but I have a memory of Luciano Becchio scoring against Boro. Just one of those players. Yeah. And he might not have even, like, it feels like John Stead scored 20 goals against Boro when he probably
actually didn't. I mean, they went through quite a spell of not playing each other that much, really, because obviously Boro had the periods in the Premier League. Leeds obviously, went down to League One at various, at some point. And they've kind of, yo-yoed in between a bit. But,
the 2 recent games that spring to mind were I think Bielsa's Boro and Bielsa's Leeds and Pulis's Boro drew 0-0 early in the season when they were both the top 2. It was a Friday night game. And then Woodgate's Boro when they were just blown away. Woodgate was absolutely down to bare bones, wasn't he? I remember Tyrone O'Neill coming off the bench, and Mark Bowler played left back one of his early games, and
that was a game that came at the end of a bit of an injury run like this, and it was the game when he just had to literally throw in what he had, wasn't it? Yeah.
But it is one of those games, isn't it? One of those occasions.
It's a proper game, isn't it? It'll be a hell of an atmosphere. And I mean, after a somewhat up and down start, Leeds look good now, don't they? They look like a team who have kept the bulk of the Premier League squad together and, certainly have the capability of finishing top 2. They're going to be up there, aren't they?
Well, you look at, again, we're speaking before their game against Swansea on Wednesday night. So if they lose that at home, then obviously that changes the dynamic slightly. And they did only draw Rotherham last time out. But like you say, they found the feet. And that front 4 of Somerville, Perrault, James and Rutter. I think they've scored 20 goals between them. Now, will you consider Bristol City have only scored 19? And you've got Patrick Bamford on the bench. Really, they should be doing what they are doing. When you look at the team, but then we know when teams come down and get into that losing rut, it's easier said than done to get out of that. But yeah,
Pirro's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Pirro for me has been up there as one of the most effective forward players in the Championship for 2 or 3 years. You just wondered who was going to take a bit of a punt on him. And to be fair, he probably isn't the type of player that a Premier League club would go and take a punt on. So it probably needed a relegated club to go for him to get that kind of move. But he's a player I like. He always impressed me when he was with Swansea.
Yeah, it's this next week, I think, is Leeds, Ipswich, Hull.
Yeah.
You probably put Preston in there last night, given Preston was 6th. Just feels not unfair, but slightly disappointing that you'd have loved to have seen an absolute full tilt Boro, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Full strength to see how they coped against a team like Leeds. But that said, the players that who've played in the last few weeks have clearly done a good enough job and deserve a crack at them on Saturday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't see it because of the way both teams play. I think it's one of those games where it can't fail to be a good game.
A good game. You're there Saturday, aren't you? I think you're there again, aren't you? Yeah, and then I'm doing the Ipswich one. So no service breaks needed to Leeds. We've got to throw it in. The Leeds.
We had a comment. I won't go digging for it now. You know my Leeds service station complaint.
Yes.
Apparently there is now a McDonald's in there.
Oh, there you go.
So it feels like I've got to stop there now.
It feels like you do, really, haven't you? Yeah. We're back. On the way back, maybe. 3 points in the bag. Quick Big Mac.
No more deceptive slips in to get a McFlurry and a coffee, only you end up spending £5.50 on a on a latte. Yeah, I think score draw on Saturday. What do you reckon?
I think it'll be high scoring. Yeah, I could see 2-2. I think it'll be a proper ding dong game. I think it'll be end to end. I think it'll be your classic entertaining, wide open championship fair, and I certainly wouldn't. I'll go for a high scoring draw. So safe travels if you're off to Elland Road. Enjoy yourselves, and we will catch up in and around that Leeds game for another edition of You and My Borough. But for now, thanks for watching. Have a great week. Hopefully, Borough injuries clear up, and hopefully we roll on with another great afternoon at Leeds. Thanks for watching You and My Borough.